Cool. One sec, my mouth always goes like completely dry the second I get on stage. Cool. I tried to pretend that I didn't rip my jacket this morning, if you can. It's meant to look smart, but it doesn't. Okay, so I just want to say thanks for having me here. It's great to be back. Thanks to the Userscape guys and to Taylor for allowing me to come back, especially after last year. I think I'm like the first non-American speaker, so hopefully you guys can just about understand me today. So can I get a thumbs up if you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so like at least 2 people. That should just about work out. So after I got back from DC last time, I paced around a lot, by the way. After I got back from DC, I watched the video because, you know, ego or something. And I noticed that there was no like mic on the audience. And if you watch it, I tell like lots of cheesy jokes during my kind of set. And you just hear me kind of like giggling to myself on stage, like, and then like a tumbleweed goes past. So like if that happens, just burst out laughing as loud as you can. And hopefully this thing will pick you up. Cool. So yeah, it's my pleasure to be foreign today. Cool. Right. I'm brilliant. So my name's Dayle, and you can contact me on Twitter or that email address, which has got a line under it, so you can probably click it if you reach out far enough. It's pretty cool. So I sound funny because I come from Wales, which is another country just on the side of England, a little bit smaller, but much better. And one of the things that I'm really proud about, I'm not super patriotic, but I really like our flag. I think it's one of the best ones you see out there. I mean, it's got a dragon on it. Come on. So I was thinking, you guys kind of like, you're really proud of your stars and your stripes, right? Yeah? Yeah, but it doesn't have a dragon on it, though, right? So what I thought is maybe if you're going for, it's like, thanks. So like, I went for everything that you love and everything that we know about the USA. So like, Cross Guns, we know you like them. Heisenberg, or Taylor, like, you know, that could be either. And McDonald's, that's like global. So you can have that if you want. That's fine. I should have started a timer before I talk, but I'm just going to go for it. Just wave me down if I run late, or we'll find out when I finish. So I guess I'm up here because I write about Laravel, and I was one of the first people to do so. So Code Happy that you see up there, that was my first book. It was about version 3 of the framework. I kind of got with it at version 2.7. 2.7? That was the release. That was like the major release, wasn't it, before 3? That was the one with the old site, yeah. So for Laravel 4, I wrote Code Bright, and it's pretty much become like the Laravel handbook. Like if you think of Gentoo, anyone installed Gentoo? Like, oh, wow, like 2 people. So like you can't install Gentoo without the Gentoo handbook. It's just like a dark art, you can't do it. And I like to think that this is the best way of like starting with Laravel. Has anyone read Code Bright? Wow, that's amazing. You know what I'm going to do, and it's something no one's done yet, and I'm really surprised about. I want to take a stage selfie. Like, I thought that was a thing, no? That's my Metro pass. But what I want to do is everyone who's kind of like read Code Bright, if you just like stand up and go crazy in a second, that'd be kind of cool. Be some good kind of feature. How do I work this? Okay, so go nuts and try not to like just swear at me behind my back. That'd be awesome. So if you could stand up and cheer. Yes. There we go. Full close-up on my head and like a couple of you guys. So that's the bit I like, Russell. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'm glad that you've read the book. It's awesome. And thanks for buying it, because, you know, lunch. Cool. So the other thing I guess I'm known for is color schemes. Who uses my color schemes package for anything? Wow, like everyone who reads Code Bright. Awesome. Cool. yeah, so if you haven't seen it yet, I've got color schemes for like every editor and like hundreds of them. If you go to that repo, I've made like this new MVC system to generate them, so it's kind of cool. Go and check it out. The color schemes that you see on the slides, that's, well, the one color scheme, that's one of them. You saw one in, with Sean. Sean around? I didn't see a hand. Is he hiding? Anyway, Sean's talk had Space Peacock in it, which is kind of cool. So last year, I came to DC. I almost said I came here. And I told the story of Laravel since its beginning, because I guess I was like one of the first to kind of get using it and get going with it. It was my first major talk of this size. So it was scary. It was super scary. You know, Americans are intimidating, right? I mean, look at you. So I came here, and I just got a new job, kind of related to what I was doing with Laravel. And that was at Box UK, which is a great company. It's kind of like a web agency / consultancy place. And I had a lot of fun there. I kind of learned a lot of stuff, met a lot of cool people, and I really enjoyed it. And in the space of a year, stuff changes, like really quickly. So here I am here. Thankful to Userscape and Taylor and everyone. They've been super awesome to me, so it's really, really nice. So I'm here to break the mold on stage, which sounds really strange, actually. This is probably like my 8th talk. I do a lot of like small meetups and kind of stuff in the UK now. But it's still scary. It's always scary. So when I talk to people outside and they're like, yeah, I don't know if I could do it. Like, I know I've had the chat with like Jeff, for example. Jeff, you've given like hundreds and hundreds of talks, right? And it's still scary. Like the first couple of minutes is the hardest part. And then you get going and you start to enjoy it. And when people laugh, it helps. So like laugh a lot, please. But not not the awkward laugh. So, okay, so I work for a startup now called Park at My House. I moved on from Box. I just want to spend a little time talking about this because it kind of relates to my talk in a way. So you guys have heard of like Airbnb, right? Yeah. Okay, so Park at My House kind of works like Airbnb for parking. So if you've got like a spare driveway or any spare space on like your private property, you can go on the site, you can rent that for free. People will book it, park it, and you'll get like all of the money that you asked for. So it's passive income. If you sign up, free money, okay? It works in the US. You can use it here. It's just that we haven't really marketed it here. So if you want to have a go, go for it. It's a Series A startup and a profitable one, which is always nice because money's good. And it has about 500,000 users in the UK, which is pretty good a user base. That's our primary location right now because parking in London is a nightmare. We're backed by BMW as well, which is fantastic. We have some kind of in-car integration. I don't have a clicker thing, so I'm just going to pace back and forth. I am now head of development, no longer just a coder, which sounds really fancy. I like it. Sounds cool. I don't know what it means. So basically, I'm a dev with a team now. I get to make decisions about architecture and the tools that we use and things like that. I'm still learning the whole project management side of things. I like picking up new skills, and this is something that's completely kind of blind to me until now. But it took some time getting used to, and I'm slowly getting there, I hope. And one good thing about it is I got to bring the entire dev team, so my entire dev team, to Laracon. So he's dreading this. Do you want to stand up, James? Just the entire dev team at Park at My House. Come on, you wuss, cheer him. Come on. Yeah. So yeah, it's actually not too bad. We've got one so far. We're recruiting. Cool. So when I started at Park at My House, I got the perfect gift. Does anyone want to take a guess at what the perfect gift is as a developer? A red panda. God, if it was a red panda. Wow. Anyone else? A car. A car, that would be cool, backed by BMW, and yet still no BMW. I mean,
a copy of your book.
I guess I could coupon myself that, I suppose. Again, if anyone wants a copy of the book, if you don't have it yet, just like come and see me and I'll give you a free copy. I'll give you a coupon. So. No, it's a blank slate. Who doesn't like a blank slate when you start a new project? Anyone? No, no hands up, because you've got that dream, right? You're going to do everything right the first time, aren't you? Like everything's going to be amazing this time. Nothing's going to fall apart. It's never going to be a mess. That's the plan, right? It doesn't work that way, though. So currently, the whole website was written by the founder. So he's not traditionally a dev, but he gets the job done. As you need to when you bootstrap a company. It was originally bootstrapped, so he was working in his bedroom, kind of thing. And it works, right? So it's practical. It works. It's written in procedural PHP, so I'm so glad I don't have to go back and look at it. That's fantastic. There's obviously no testing for it. That would be really difficult with what's there. Why did I put single website there? Oh, I guess because, yeah, it's one app. It's one application. I don't have to work with that, though. Why am I pacing back? I didn't need to change slide. I put 2 on 1. So I was brought in to build the new architecture. So it's going to be written by panda lovers, apparently. I must have been really tired when I wrote that. Yeah, it works and looks good doing it. So it's different to how it's working now. It's written on Laravel, which is great. I used to be working with Symfony 2, which is another great framework, but I love Laravel and it's easier. It's got tests, which are mostly BDD tests, kind of written with bhat, where we're kind of like hitting an API as a client would. That gives me the confidence that I need for it, and I think that's what testing is all about. And it's a service-based architecture, so we've got like an API at the center, building a load of clients, because stuff like in-car integrations, the stuff that's coming with Apple, like that's obviously really exciting for us, push a button, park. So that's what's going on. So I've got a slide here saying, where is this talk going? That's an intro to Park at My House, but it kind of relates to what I'm going towards, but one more sidetrack. I just want to talk about the art of teaching. These are the rules that I live by when I write a blog post or a chapter, or if I'm just talking to someone trying to teach them it. I keep it simple and friendly and a little bit insane, I guess. And I tend to move one step at a time. I don't assume that anyone knows anything. Like if you're writing for a beginner, you need to like explain every step of it. I think that's really important. And lots of panda photos, that really helps if you can get those in there. Although those are like my thing, so try giraffes or something. I like them. But what happens though when you become an educator? You get asked the worst questions in the known universe. Anyone hazard a guess? Will this be on the test? I could do a test at the end. I may, if I run out of time. Anyone? No. A couple of mumbles. I'm going to walk back then. I was going to walk over there and take some answers, but fine. So the questions are, where do I put X? How do you do X? And in your projects, what do you do with X? And the worst part about these questions is the do I and do you and the do you do again. Those are the parts that bother me. I don't mind teaching how something works. And let me explain a little bit further, like why it sucks. Because like Laravel is amazing, especially version 4. It's so flexible, and there's so much that you can do with it. You can do absolutely everything. There's like 100 ways to accomplish any task. And that's really useful to us. But if I answer those questions in the way that I write code, I'm imparting my personality and my choices on development. And I don't like doing that. I like for people to come up with their own thing. We all learn at like a different rate, I think. And if you try and teach the best approach from the get-go, you're not driven by curiosity. You're not like driven by the need to improve or anything. You're just following like doctrine, technically. So I don't like teaching that way. As I put, there's a risk of damage to the person's education. I don't like that. There's also the preacher effect. This is something that I've kind of coined. But as soon as you get involved with a project or you make a name for yourself around a project, you'll go and try something new. We all try something new. You saw like Sean and Jeffrey's talks yesterday, fantastic. It's great to experiment with new things. But the problem is, if you're known and you experiment with a new thing, you might want to share your information about it. So like, I tried procedural code again. It was amazing. I got stuff done. It was fun, right? And then on Twitter, it's suddenly like, oh, Dale's done procedural code. It's definitely the way forward. Like everyone should be using this, and like that's the preacher effect, I think. Like so it's something that's really dangerous. Again, I don't like drama or any kind of conflict, especially in open spaces. So no one throw anything at me if that's okay. But yeah, I don't like that. So where do the questions come from? I guess the person to blame is Taylor. Where's he gone? No, obviously, I can't blame Taylor, but it's the Laravel package. Or I call it the app package, or it's kind of like a blueprint for your project, right? It's amazing for learning because you've got folders there ready to go. You know roughly, you see the controllers folder, you're like, oh, what's a controller? You go in, you look, you know what's going on. And it's standard MVC that's kind of the intro to every type of web app. It's great, and there's a place for most things that you use quite often. And it helps you get started really quickly. Like as Taylor spoke, you know, the idea is you want to get started with Laravel all the way straight through to deployment. Like it needs to be as easy as possible. And having that structure there means you can get going. You can write your code, jump in. I'm missing some leads. I'm not quite sure what I was saying there. I think it's basically that it doesn't cover everything, okay? So it's only what's most people are going to be using. So what I want to do today is try to answer these dreaded questions, because I still get asked them. It's something I want to experiment with and see how it works. But there's a disclaimer on this. It's not the only way. There are 1,000 ways. It's not the best way, I'm sure. I mean, there's smarter people than me here for definite. You saw them speak yesterday. And it's just my way, what I'm working on currently, and I'm still learning. And I think, like, with PHP, we're all still learning, right? No one's really got it right yet. It's only been, what, like 1,000 years or something. Okay. So let's create a new Laravel project. You have arrived. I love that page. Absolutely love that page. So the first steps, we go and get the code base. And what I tend to do is I put the code base inside like a project directory in the root of my repository. The reason being so I can put like environmental stuff like Vagrant and build scripts and things like that outside of it. Keeps it away from the project itself. And then I'll go and Composer install that. So if you're lost now, I don't know how to explain further. Read code bright for definite, and then watch the video. Okay, so the next part is something I like to call Hulk smash mode. I just love that scene so much. I'm a huge Marvel fan. You may not have noticed unless you kind of read the book, I guess. Okay, so this is Hulk smash mode. You need the alias. It doesn't actually work without the alias, okay? So you need the alias. And I go and get rid of the controllers directory. I get rid of the models directory. It's like a cleanup for me, the commands. I don't like things there that I'm not intending to use. I know that sounds crazy. I am intending to use controllers, don't worry, but I don't want it in its default location, and I get rid of the filters. So basically, all of that hard work that Taylor's done, I go and like completely destroy it and rip it out. So I'm a nice guy. But if you do that, you also need to clean up the composer.json. So you need to get rid of the matching directories there. I left the migrations and the seeds in. Okay. And there's a sneaky, sneaky class loader there as well. You know, it won't die, but I tend to just like rip this whole section out. I don't use it. So yeah, I go ahead and delete that. Has anyone not noticed Taylor's awesome 3-line slanting comments? And just wondering if it's the first time anyone's seen that. I think it's pretty awesome. Like I don't know how you do that every time, how you work that. I tried it. I'm not clever enough. Okay, so the filters file as well, I've moved that. I'm actually thinking of moving it, so I deleted it on that screen, but I'll probably move it somewhere else. So I could just update this path, or if I'm not using it, I will get rid of it if I don't need those filters. Okay, so the application directory in my project is now just for config. That's like the only thing that's there. I've got the config, I've got migrations, which I class as config. I've got like, what else is in there? Like the storage directory, not necessarily config, but it kind of works. So there's no real code in there. And then a wild source folder appeared. So I put a folder called source relative to the app in the project. What I'm going to do is I'm going to PSR4 autoload that. So if you haven't seen PSR4 autoloading yet, you've probably seen PSR0, which is just mapping the namespaces to the class path and class name. But PSR4 kind of strips off the bit at the start. It's a really nice way of working with it. So you see the declaration and autoload there. So I put the start of the namespace, so that's my kind of vendor section of it, and vendor and project. I map that to the source folder. You should probably read the disclaimer, because bad things will happen if you don't. But you need those two trailing slashes on the end for it to work. It shouts at you if you don't know. And Geordie will come around and pull out your teeth. So I see two types of code, and this is going to sound strange. This is just how I tend to name them. I call things like component registration, things like that. I call that procedural code because it's kind of outside of like an object scope. Like you're dealing with them, but it's just like a flow. It's just like a file. So I call that procedural. As things like declaring your routes, like registering a new validator or a listener or something like that. That's what I continue to be procedural. And also configuration, like arrays of configuration. Waste some time. And classes. So classes are just our code. That's what we're writing. We're writing controllers. I tend to always work with a class where I can. Like in Laravel, you can pass a closure. But lately, I always work with a class, really. I can instantiate them. I can test them. It's fun. There's also component implementations. There's what I call things like validators, and you'll see something called a sanitizer later on. So my own components, I keep those as classes in that directory. This is our actual work, basically. So where do you put the procedural bits? I mean, I rip them out of the other section. So what I tend to do is I add like a folder, sorry, not a folder, a PHP file that's specific to the type of kind of service or component that I'm registering. So I've got composers for view composers. I have filters for filters, observers. I use observer instead of listener. I know it's kind of like the trend to go with listener with Laravel, but I'm old-fashioned or something. I use observers. Your routes file and your services. The services is like a quick way of putting bindings into the container if you don't want a whole service provider. So I kind of stole that from Symfony, actually. So yeah, what I do is I go into the original routes file and I link these through to in my source directory because I kind of want it there with my code. Again, this is just my structure. It kind of works for me, so you take what you want from this. I can use base path, or I can use the directory constant to load them. Base path will get you the like the root underneath source and app. Okay, so like the PHP community is pretty sensitive about testing at the moment because we're all excited about it, right? We're all excited, and no one's doing it right. I'm sure. Yeah, we're still learning. I ripped out the tests folder. You may have noticed. Don't freak out. That's a terrible Photoshop. Cool, it's okay, they just move. I make a new folder, the root of the project called tests. It's next to everything else. I keep it separate from my code and my configuration. And within there, I put a folder for the type of framework I'm using. Like I know a lot of people will be like functional acceptance and stuff like that. But I do it by tool. And the reason being, a lot of people like to choose like a favorite framework to use for testing, and I've always thought, like, why not all? Like you go to write a test, and why don't you choose the one that makes the most sense for the test you're writing and put it in there? You're going to run them all anyway, or it's just time really, and I don't worry about the time of my builds on the CI environment. That's fine for me, and it's a dev dependency, all of these packages, so like. It's not going to make a difference in production. So I bootstrap them all, I put them in there, and those are where I put my tests. Okay, so Dayle pro tip 1. There is no 2. Actually, I kind of ran out after 1. Base class, all the things. This is what I tend to start with when I make a new directory in source. So let me give you an example. Okay, so in my observers directory, I've got a base observer abstract class. Nothing in it. absolutely nothing in it right now. I'll still make it before I make my first observer, and I will extend that. Here's a better example as well. Probably used to the eloquent models. There's two ways of doing it, really. There's actually a third way, but no, I'll teach these two. You can go with the full class, which is the eloquent model. That's actually what you're calling when you're using extend eloquent. That's the class that you're extending right there. And I extend the original class just so I can grab everything I need to. You can also extend the alias if you want. So that's in the root namespace. The difference is if you change the alias, the second method will respect that and use the new class. The original one, if you really desperately want that eloquent model, that won't change. So you've got the choice there. Meanwhile, at Userscape, and this is fictional, so a scenario happened. Ian's a really good kind of customer guy, and he wants to protect all of the information, right? Yeah, right, yeah, cool. So he doesn't want to lose that information. It's useful to his users. And Taylor's in a panic because it's like 6 p.m. on a Friday or something. I don't know how late you guys work here.
That would be a very good boss to be, though.
Yeah, true. Okay, so he can use soft deletes, right? That's a quick way of solving it. And this isn't very 4.2 friendly, so this would be a trait in the new version of the framework. But that's all we need is this property on our base on our models. So you can go ahead and add that to every model if you want, but I'm not. I'm going to add it to the base model. And just one quick line, suddenly everything that I've extended in advance is now soft deletable. So that's kind of why I have a base model. It's so that I can apply common things across them. I can override defaults. I can provide like little shortcuts if I need something quickly, if I see myself doing something. You can move that away to a model if you want to, but sometimes it's just that little helper function or method that's useful across the board. So that's why I base class all the things. Okay, so what we've done, we've changed the shape of the package, and it's now kind of familiar, shape of the project, and it's now familiar to what we see with packages, right? So you're probably used to looking at third-party packages for Laravel now, and you'll see like a source folder, you'll see like a tests folder, all the bootstrapping for the test environment. And what it means is we've now changed it so that the framework's almost like a utility to our code rather than leading the structure of it. And that's one thing I like just borrowing the bits I need. I could pull in the components on their own, but I'm not going to do that. So all we've got remaining is that blueprint for config, and I'm fine with that. That's fine. You really have to go in there. So is it really an app folder anymore? No, I guess it's config. I tend not to rename it, but if you want to, I've put these here. These are in bootstrap paths. If you want to change them, you can change it to config, just respect all the paths. I also put one in there for source, because it can be handy sometimes. So I could change those links back to use that if I want with the paths helper. Okay, so the next part of my talk is about building your own Batman utility belt, or your own kind of toolkit of things to reuse. As devs, we solve problems for other people. We avoid their repetition by building cool tools. And we need to get in the habit of doing that more for ourselves as well, because we tend to repeat a lot of it, right? You'll find yourself doing the same thing over and over. Clients tend to want the same thing. So we should make our own lives easier, right? So this is what I teach in my book. And it's more of an example of how to use the validation component than anything else. So we take the arrays that we need, optional messages, a third parameter. We create the validator instance. We check to see if it passes. We bail out. That's just a terrible bailout. Don't do that. And then, because we're in America, we launch a missile, sing the national anthem, and evil laugh. Cool. Okay, this is what our validators look like. Normally, I'd inject it, but I'm instantiating it there just so that you can see. And I call the validator with the data and then a set name. The reason for this is I'm writing an API, and depending on which endpoint you hit, it's related to the same entity or the same model, but we may want to validate it in a different way. For example, we may have more of a patch request, and that will be a different validation set to a create request. So I wanted a way of separating those two. I put the DD in there, but normally we throw, well, Jeffrey said yesterday, like, he feels okay about throwing a validation exception. I feel the same thing. It's kind of like, it's like a stop to your code, especially when you're writing an API, right? Because you're going to give the messages back and let them deal with it. So we've got like a custom exception handler. If I get any time at the end, I'll talk about that. And it's just a nice way of dealing with it. Okay, so this is the magic that goes on under the scenes. So we've got a validate method. I'll convert a collection to an array. An array or a collection is the only thing I'll normally pass into it. And then I'll run sanitizers on it. I'll explain that in a second. And then what I do is the second parameter is a rule set. So I apply the rules based on a rule set. I apply the same messages based on the name of that rule set again. And then I run the validator. And the rest of it's just like a wrapper to that. I can get the errors out if I need to, things like that. Okay, is everyone good with that? That make sense? It's my first kind of like source slide, I guess. That theme's Peacock, by the way. So this is what my validators look like. And it works for us. So we extend this base validator, we provide a rule set, and it's like a multi-dimensional array of rule sets and then field to rule values. Those are just the rules, but I can also have the same kind of array for messages, and also for sanitizers as well. And sanitizers I'll take a look at now, okay? Right, okay, so code is kind of strict with formats. We want everything in a certain way, right? But real life really isn't. I mean, an example that I could give, I guess, is credit cards. You may enter a credit card with dashes in it, like some people do that, or the spaces in it. Same with like phone numbers and postcodes and things like that, okay? But who thinks that if you enter a credit card with dashes and you are expecting just like plain numbers, who thinks that that's a failure worth reporting back to the user? Anyone? Cool. That's what I like to hear. So this is why we have sanitizers. So the idea is if we can fix something before we validate it, then we should. CodeIgniter used to do this kind of stuff with the callable methods. It was in with validation, but I didn't like that. It was kind of like two concerns there. So I wasn't a fan. So I wrote something really quick. And this is the base sanitizer that I'm using. So it's kind of, I won't say hacky, but it's just something quick to do the job for us. So you can list a number of sanitizers, and then you have the methods prefixed with sanitize that you can use to run over the data set before it works. So this is the first version of it, and it worked. It's kind of cool. So here's an example. Just string to lowering the email so everything's consistent in the database. That's like another really useful use for sanitizing. Like it's great to see everything in the same form. Okay, so one method there, string to lower on the email field. And these kind of tools, they evolve over time. So we discovered that we had the need to kind of apply the same sanitizer to different fields and kind of like attach different ones in different ways. So I came up with this. And one thing that's great to do is to look at what the framework's given you and work with that. So like the syntax of this, is anyone lost by that? Because you guys work with Laravel. Does that seem fairly similar? Very silent. Yep, thumbs up. Awesome. Yeah, so it's similar to the validation component. So we can register a new sanitizer using a keyword or a key and attach it to a class method. We can resolve that out of the IOC container, and it gives us a way of accessing any other dependencies we really want. And then you can just attach them to the fields as kind of like rules and validation, right? I felt the need to, when you're working on a Mac full screen and you like slide with control and control or command and left and right, I felt the need to do that then. That was kind of weird. Okay. Seeding, this is my favorite new utility that I built for us. So we're building an API. As I said, we test against a real database with this. There's not a lot of overhead with that for us. It just felt kind of right. And we simulate real client requests. I want it to be as close to the client using the application as possible. that's where I get my confidence from. That's how I know that I've done my job and it works. So you may test more extensively than that, but I write exactly what I need to build my own confidence. So we need some fixed data to test against because we need to make sure we're getting the right stuff back. As I said, this is my favorite component. It's a bit crazy though. I was showing Taylor this last night. I couldn't fit it all in like one column, so now it's flowing down to, if you see what's going on there. But this is our seeder class, and I'm just going to explain what it does there. All of the magic's in the base seeder, and it would take so long to go over it. But if you want to see that at some point, I'll show you. But you specify the table that you want to seed, and if you look at the second section, you see like a fake method. And what you do there is you build an array for that record that's kind of like a blueprint of fake data using the faker library, actually. So we don't want to write all of the information for all of our seeds if we can fake it. So faker that array allows us to build a fake record. And if you want something similar as well, Jeffrey's got a package for this of new as well. It's kind of similar, like hydrating fake. What was the name of yours?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Isn't it like factory or something?
Oh, factory.
Yeah.
That's more for testing. Yeah.
Yeah, but for hydrating the database essentially.
Exactly.
Well, cool. So yeah, that's my fake blueprint. But what happens is if I run that and that's all that's in the class, it will go and hydrate 25 fake records in the database. Okay, and I can override that using another property, but I've not shown it here. But this seeds array that you see on the side, that's where I can put my static data in. So here I'm fixing 2 users, so that's James, who's working with me, and myself. And what it will do is when I run this seed utility, it will seed 23 entirely fake users and 2 partially fake users with fixed data for the fields that you see there. So the first 2 records will have the names Dayle, Rees, and James Johns, but the rest of it will be faked according to the blueprint, so it kind of merges what's there. So I've got like a mix of fake and real. The reason I needed to do that is I can fix faker using a random seed to like generate the same way every time. That's cool. But if you add another option in, it changes the order, and the order of that random generation changes for the entire thing, and that data changes. So I still want something to compare against. So that's why we used that. Actually, at first, I didn't even see the seed function of it, and that worried me enough to make this. The modify thing at the bottom is just like a hook that I could put in on the user to hash the password. It doesn't have to be there. Also, 2 helper methods for it. These have been really useful to us. So you can just get a unique ID from a table name to kind of like forge fake relationships, or a random key from that table name. You can also provide secondary parameters, so it respects any keys that you've already provided in your fixed seed array. So there's some kind of clever stuff that happens under the hood there. So that's an example of one of the tools that we've made for ourselves. The other one is something that Jeff touched on yesterday, and I started to freak out. Providers is what we've called them, but he called them arrays on steroids, which is kind of like the fact that the Laravel collection is really handy, and it's nice to treat everything in the same way. So sometimes in our system, we have stuff that doesn't need to be stored in the database. It's not going to change, but we need to relate back to it. So we've got this concept of something called a provider. It's not like a service provider. So you've got your multi-dimensional, your key value array internally of the data you want, and a default value. And you can go and get a collection with this make method. You can proxy some through, and I left the cursor in there because I'm not clever enough to use the markdown thing, but I'm going to steal that if I talk again. If they let me talk again. And you can get the default value. So for things like populating select boxes and stuff, that's really cool for us. It's another one that I tend to use. Okay, practical events. Again, kind of touching on what Jeff was talking about, but he mentioned using events, and certainly Sean used it in an interesting way that I'm definitely going to be looking at. I like the idea of the command bus. But what we do is I tend to separate anything that's kind of like notification or like an email or anything like that from the actual logic of what I'm doing. So wherever it is, if you call it, if you do it in your controller, or if you have some kind of concept of a domain, or in your model, I still like to take anything notification-wise aside. So what I'll do is, if I'm writing anything, I'll fire a useful event. And it's something that saves time later, I find. It's not a huge amount of overhead, I find, if nothing's listening to it. And I'm willing to take that hit on performance for the flexibility in my project, personally. So what I do is I fire an event when anything significant happens, with the area of the system and what's happened as the key. And then I pass anything that's kind of really useful to that event in as a parameter. So an example of how this has really helped us. So this is the founder park at my house, and similar to the scenario I said earlier, he just decided that when we charge a user a certain value, we need to send them an invoice, okay? So to me, that's notification. That's like sending out an email based on something that's happened in the system. So I'll go back and I'll create an observer. Again, extending my base class because there's useful stuff on that. So I've got two examples there. I can report the payment to like an external tracking source. I think that's another amazing use for events. We track a lot of stuff in our system. So being able to attach an event to anything like that and feed it out to something analytical, like Segment or something like that, really useful for us. And also sending out the email invoice. So I've not put the code in there. And then the bindings will be in the observer's PHP file that I created earlier. You see the long namespace there? Sometimes I create a constant for those kind of things, just to bring it back a bit, because I hate stupidly long lines. Depends on what you enjoy. We're all still working stuff out. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about service providers, because they're another great way to structure sections of your application. They're probably the most useful thing in Laravel, especially when you're writing something that you intend to redistribute. Okay, so they integrate a service into your application. They're like an entry point into the framework for anything third-party, or even your own code if you want to. You could do your roots there. And they have direct access to the application instance, which is kind of implements the container as well. It's like the central point of the framework. Really useful. So let's see an example of one. Okay, so this is like an empty service provider. And you should implement the base service provider that you'll find it in support. And it's an abstract, and you need to provide this register method. So let's do something, right? Okay, and don't freak out. I know this isn't right yet. Okay, so this is bootstrapping Stripe as an example. Okay, so we've got a Stripe service provider. And first of all, I just write the code that I need to pull Stripe in, to get the configuration, and to build the client, okay? So simple. But it's not right yet, okay? So I need to put that somewhere. So the container seems like the sensible place for it. So the container, or the application instance, is you can find that it's set on the service provider through its constructor. So it's this.app if you need to get to that. And everything lives inside that, absolutely everything. So I can bind it in the container. It implements array access. I can just bind it like that, boom, in the container. But again, it's not right. See, does anyone want to call out the problem with this? No? Perfect. So basically, every time the bootstrap process of the framework runs, the array of service providers is handled and the register method is called on them. So the issue with that is every single request that comes into your application is going to hit this, and it's going to create the Stripe instance and bind it in the container. You don't always need it. That could be a waste of time and a waste of resources. So what you do is you do this. So you can use the share method on the application instance, and that takes a closure as a parameter. The idea is the first time you try to resolve this object out of the container, it will execute the closure and kind of like cache that value that you get back and then return it to you. So it will only execute when it's needed, only when it's called for the first time, and every subsequent call to it will retrieve the same object. So it's kind of like a pseudo singleton effect. It's really useful. It's the thing you'll probably most be using unless you need a new instance each time. We can fix this up a bit though, okay? So Anyone want to hazard what's wrong or what we could improve on this one? Inject app. To do what? Roughly like that. So in the last slide, you could see that we're using the config facade, which is okay, but it's using an alias, so that works, but you're using that alias. If that's changed on someone else's system, if you intend to I hate this word, redistribute it, then that's an issue. If they've changed it, that code's no longer going to work. So we need to be careful. So what we can do is, because everything is located in the IOC container, we'll go and grab it from there. Okay, so if you pass app, or if you take a parameter called app into your closure, when that's executed, Laravel will hand you the application instance. That means that you can do more with it. So in this instance, we're getting the config component, which is normally hidden behind that facade, and we're calling the get on it. If you don't know where to find that key, there's now a new section on the docs that will show it, or if you want to learn about the framework and find it yourself, have a look in application support in the facades directory. You'll see the get facade accessor method in each of those. That will be the key. Or go and have a look at the service providers to see how the framework's own components are bootstrapped and placed into the container. It's a great learning mechanism. Okay, so I want to finish up, and I hope I haven't gone too fast because I didn't start a timer, but don't worry, I can talk endlessly if needed. Okay, so things to consider when you're doing this, when you're building your own shape to your project. And this is really important. The upgrade path, you don't want to stay on the same version of Laravel, not when you've got like all of these great goodies coming in 4.2 and like 4.3, you know, Taylor's written some things that you can convert an entire Rails app just in one line, so amazing. So pressure's on there, right? So yeah, you want to upgrade, so don't block that path. Nothing that I've done here has ruined it. You may need to be a little bit aware when you're going through the update instructions, so if it says, oh, place this new filter in the filters file, you know that your filters are elsewhere in that other filters file. It's fine, it'll still work. So keep that upgrade path open. The other thing is that I said this is for me, and when I started with this role and I was building the application, it was just me. James came like 2.5 months ago now, something like that. So I'd built a lot of the structure by then. So if you're going to do this, you need to consider your team, because if you make the project non-standard, then it's more difficult to pick up. You know, you need to be aware of the changes that are there. So either you need to document them, or you need to communicate them to the team, or just find a balance where it's not going to disturb the entire team. And the third one is keep trying. So you can always make improvements. These tool sets evolve. You can bring it out into separate packages if you find yourself using them a lot. And open source them if they're useful. I mean, I don't know if anything I've put there is going to be useful to others, but I'd be happy to share that if you'd like it. Yeah, so keep trying, keep finding ways to simplify the way you work and to build these additional tools and projects. Does anyone know how long I've been going? Did I start? A couple of minutes, that works for me because yep. But yeah, I'd be happy to take any additional questions, or I can talk about another component if you'd like. Anyone have questions about it? Anything that I've done there? Anyone find anything that would you apply that to any of your projects? Any of these additional tools?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Sanitizers are. I think like a few different frameworks have like implemented them in different ways. Like, did anyone like the way that CodeIgniter did it? Of interest? Yeah. Have you seen that? Like with CodeIgniter, you pipe the validation rules like you would with Laravel. But if you put a callable function in there, something like trim, it'll apply that first. So that was the way of doing it. I didn't like it though. It's like sanitizing and validation in one thing. It didn't work for me. It didn't work. Cool. How far off am I?
You're like right on time.
Right in time. That works for me then. Great. Thanks for... I'll grab my laptop. Thanks, guys.